welcome back. This week we are still in our literary essays, our little work that we're doing with a character from one of our stories that we chose. And so you guys have been building claims and thesis, and you gathered text evidence last week. And so today my goal is to teach you how to add elaboration, or to elaborate, which is just a fancy word basically for how to add details that are like examples, that describe better, that are specific, that give evidence, that make your writing even better about your character. So this lesson's going to be in a little bit different order. And if you are already watching the mini lesson first and you haven't done the Padlet first, go ahead and pause this, go back and do the work on the slide in order. But our goal is to learn how to elaborate. And so to do that first, if you look closer at the beginning of the slides, there is on 3 slides, this is a student written example of a literary essay. I know it looks daunting and long. It's 5 paragraphs. Really, they're writing 3 paragraphs about this character, Squeaky, from Raymond's Run, and they're describing Squeaky, and they do a great job at elaborating. They have a lot of examples. So you may not know quite what elaboration is yet, but what I'd like you to do first is skim through it, highlight any like line or sentence that stands out to you as, wow, that really sounds good. That makes it more clear to me who Squeaky was, and just highlight the portions that you like, that you think the author does elaborate well. And then you're going to, on this slide, you'll see a Padlet. And if you'll go ahead and click on that link, and if you'll take a screenshot of one section that you highlighted that you really liked, you're going to highlight that and you're going to add it to our Padlet here. You can see I already did one portion here. And this way you guys can see examples before I actually teach you the next part. So go ahead and stop the video and do that first. If you have done that, we're going to move on. Okay. And I'm going to teach you just a little bit and model for you about ways that you can elaborate in some of the work you've already done. So like we said, elaborate is just a fancy word for what we call the 3 E's. So we have explain, give examples, and evidence are our 3 E's, okay? And they often have these little sentence stems on the right. So these would be great if maybe your teacher has them on the board, or if you can go back and look at these to help you when you do your assignment today, because they help give you a start to a sentence to add elaboration. So one way to do that is to just explain more in a situation, simply by saying, this is important because, like we've been talking about Chloe, so I'll show you mine in a minute. I use that quite a bit. Or the reason for this is, or this shows this because. You're just kind of going to a deeper level of explanation about your character. You could also just give examples. So you could simply start like a specific example from the story. So you could start with, for example, Chloe, told a friend that she wasn't friends with Maya, or as proof, or to illustrate. It just kind of starts that sentence to explain more. And then the last one is evidence, which you guys worked on last time, your text evidence, but you could add another sentence with some of these starters. In the story, the character does, or in the story, Chloe says, or the text states. I love this one, and you're going to see that I use this one. That's when you have quotes. You can actually take a line, copy it word for word. If you do, though, you have to put quotes around it because it's not your sentence, right? So you could just say the text states this, to kind of prove your point and give evidence to how that character is, or the author shows this by, okay? So what we're going to do is I'm going to show you my example here. This probably looks familiar because if you did the March 4th and 5th lesson last week, Mrs. Anderson, this was her example. Her thesis is up here. Chloe is unkind at the beginning of each kindness, but at the end she's remorseful. And then she gave 3, written in black here, 3 examples of how on the first day she didn't smile at Maya and turned her back when she sat next to Chloe. She joined in with her friends to make fun of Maya's clothing, calling her never new. And at the end, she thinks about everything she wished she could have done and that the kindness she never showed. So she shows she's remorseful. Those are all 3 great pieces of text evidence, but we can also elaborate on them. So I went back and looked at my stems here, and I took each piece of evidence that she had, and I wrote my work in blue, okay, as my example, and I reread my evidence, and I tried to figure out, well, what stem, how could I elaborate on that? How could I either explain more about it? How could I give another example? Or how could I use evidence about it? So, for example, on the first one, on Maya's first day of school, she said, Chloe didn't smile at Maya and turned her back on Maya when she sat next to Chloe. I decided to say, this is important because, okay, because I didn't really feel like I needed a quote there or anything. I just felt like I should explain it more. So this is important because even though Maya was new to the class and probably nervous, Chloe still chose to ignore her. So I was thinking about, man, someone's first day of school is like the most scary part, right? When you're new. So to me, Chloe was even meaner because of that. Like, this girl is new. You should be extra nice to her and welcoming. And she was intentionally not. So I thought I would elaborate more on that and add that. Then I went to my second one. Chloe joined in with her friends to make fun of Maya's clothing, calling her never new. So I thought, well, how could I elaborate on that? And I got back into the text and kind of looked, and I found an actual line in the text that to me adds how bad that was. And I was looking over here in my prompts, I used the text states where Maya said, something like that is what I was thinking. So I ended up adding to it, and I put in the text, Maya even tells her friend, because she's talking to her friend. And I put the actual quotes of what she put. She's not my friend, I whispered back. And then once I put the quote, I have to explain it, right? So I added over here kind of this shows, right here, this shows blank because I came back and I said, this shows how intentionally mean Chloe was to Maya. I kind of changed a little bit, but it just shows a little bit more of explanation and elaboration. And then on the last one was Mrs. Anderson had written, at the end of the story, Chloe thinks about all the things she wished she could have said to Maya, the kindness she never showed. So I thought on this one, it might be good to, when I was rereading each kindness, I noticed there was a line at the end that to me really showed how remorseful she was. And it said, my throat filled with all the things I wished I could have said to Maya. Like she was really almost choked up about it, right? So I decided to use the stem, the text states again, and I put it in quotes. I put the text states, quotes, my throat filled with all the things I wished I could have said to Maya. Now, I don't want to just says it states. I want to also explain it. So I used my phrase again. This is important because it clearly shows Chloe's remorse over her decisions. Okay, so I just went from just 3 sentences about Maya. I went to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 sentences by just elaborating my same points and kind of using these stems, pulling some quotes from the story or the video, the Pixar short you read, and adding them in to just kind of beef up that argument in that paragraph. So here's what we'd like you to do today. You're not writing a paragraph or anything today. What we'd like you to do is you're going to go back to that March 4th and 5th assignment, which was on Thursday and Friday last week. You're going to find this chart. Okay, that's what Mrs. Anderson looks like. Yours would look like this. You submitted it on March 4th and 5th. You're going to go take a screenshot of that if you haven't, okay? And instead of having you rewrite everything, you're going to just have that in your photos, and you're going to go, you can actually add text to your photo in the Photos app. So if you're not sure how to do that, watch this little tutorial how to do that. But all I did for mine is I didn't want to retype everything we'd already written last lesson. So I just, in a different color, so it's really easy for whoever's grading it to see, I added a text box and I added my sentences to this exact same picture. I saved it, and I'm going to turn it in this way. You can see I added that this is my example as well as Mrs. Anderson's. So for you, go back to that chart, find it, take a picture, add the text boxes on the photo, screenshot it again, and turn it back in. If for some reason that chart does not have enough room for you, I did put a blank one here if you would prefer to write them here so that we can see, but you would have to copy and paste your first sentence in here from your last chart so we could see how you're elaborating. So feel free to use this if you need, and then just take a screenshot and turn that in. Happy writing, everybody.